Phoenix Suvayas is going to be...
It's actually pronounced Suvayas.
Suvayas, thank you. Phoenix Suvayas is going to talk on punchlines of human history. I have a feeling this might have some humor in it. So he is going to look at the growth and development of mythological and religious traditions and how they can give us a greater insight into what some mystics refer to as the cosmic Job.
Well,
before you continue,
okay.
A little bit about Phoenix. You probably know a little bit about him. He's a founding member of St. Rosenkreuz Abbey, an interfaith Gnostic center of research in Milwaukee, which isn't too far from here. Virtually raised in a seminary, he comes from a family of pastors, ministers, and theologians representing multiple traditions. So, Phoenix, the floor is yours.
Well, when I came up with the idea for this, it was a lot different than how it ended up in the end. So,
oh, that's fine.
But
that's
the
fine.
title is still applicable.
Right, okay.
And I was hoping to get a lot in about the 22 cards of the tarot, the 22 paths of the Tree of Life as they relate to the 22 chapters of Revelation, and talk about the numerological significances in Revelation, how 666 actually deals with the heart chakra, Tifereth, and the what the mystics of the 1800s called the lower self, because they didn't quite understand chakras, as did their predecessors. Didn't their predecessors, as much as we do now. And how 777 represents the throat. That book is littered with fascinating numerological information. But I decided not to go that route yet. So I prepared a statement that I'm going to read. But first, I'm going to hand these out, pass these around. I was going to, in the original talk, in the original version of the talk, I was going to work in a lot on the swastik. In Hindi, it's pronounced swastik. The A is silent, the A denotes feminine gender. It comes from Sanskrit word su means good, asti means to be, to exist, ik means all that is in existence. It's a prayer for a positive existence for all that exists. And it's a symbol that is still used by over half of the entire global population as a holy symbol. And this is why I put this picture here. This is at an airport. This is the prayer room at an airport in Thailand. And all throughout China, Japan, all throughout Asia, and even some parts of Europe where the most horrendous things under the banner of the symbol occurred, you find prayer rooms for Buddhists and Hindus marked with the swastik. Not so in America, because of the stigma and associations that are attributed to it from a very minute percentage of the population who are very ignorant of many things, including the fact that this symbol used to be used by the ancient Israelites as a symbol of the Tetragrammaton, the fourfold name of God. It is also, in the Norse tradition, it is the symbol of the equivalent of the Tetragrammaton in their tradition, who is Thor, and it was considered the symbol of the hammer of Thor. It also has attributions with Jupiter, which is if you look in 777 and other books with good correspondences, you'll see these. And in Buddhism, it represents the heart chakra of the Buddha. And there's an old tradition in Asia that a statue of Buddha is not a true statue of Siddhartha Gautama after he became Buddha, unless it has the heart seal, which is the swastika on the heart. Because the Greco-Roman influence that came in from the West was when the people of that region started depicting Buddha as a human being. Before that, Buddha was depicted with the symbol the swastika, or footprints with swastikas on the toes, representing walking in the footsteps of the Buddha, because it was emphasized at that time that we are all future Buddhas, shouldn't depict Buddha, but and in India, this is the symbol of Ganesh, elephant-headed god of the crossroads. And in Africa, this is still used as a holy and sacred Adinkra symbol. And leading anthropologists, up until a certain period of time, have always regarded this as the most ancient and universal symbol of all of humanity. It was found cross-continentally and in the same context in the Native American and Aztec and Mayan traditions, as well as the ancient Hebrew and African and Indian and Asian traditions, and all of the earliest forms of religious and philosophical. I was going to work that in there, and I suppose I did now.
I'm glad you did though, Phoenix, because several years ago he gave a talk, actually it was a presentation, on the, you call it the, how you say it? You don't say swastika, you say
Swastika.
swastika. And
the Nazis didn't even call it that. They called it the Hakenkreuz. It sounds really ridiculous. It means bent cross.
but it was a fascinating presentation because it was so well researched and developed, and included representatives from the various religious traditions. And he showed people who were interviewed about this and how it was used and how brilliant the symbol was. So I was one of those who was, ignorant, about actually the real importance of that particular symbol. So that was probably one of the best presentations I've ever seen, still to this day. And I hope that someday you will repeat it.
I would love to.
It could easily be a 2-hour presentation to really cover everything that you have.
I've got 5 hours of material on
5 hours of material, right. So, so I'm glad you incorporated that this evening.
Alright, well here's the prepared lecture that I wrote. Anton LaVey fulfilled an important function in creating the Church of Satan in the mid-20th century. He made the previously fictitious practice of Satan worship an actuality. Before LaVey's Church of Satan, the generality and vagueness of the concept of Satan worship, shrouded in a cloud of arcane and esoteric mystique, allowed it to be easily projected onto any group one might hate or fear. This was enormously profitable for the various power seekers who found means to dominate populations through divide and conquer stratagems over the centuries, as Sylvester McMonkey McBean does in Seuss's classic The Sneetches. But as Alan Watts pointed out in his book, The Two Hands of God, Satan was a rather benign and even goofy archetype prior to the 1300s. More of a scriptural comic relief character than the demonic persona attributed to him today with its sinister visage. By the way, the word sinister, as we use it today, also dates from roughly that period of Christian history, and etymologically means left, as in left-handed. The left hand was associated with the right-brained feminine artistic inclination, which to the patriarchal empire of the Roman Catholic Church at that time was considered satanic, as were the majority of feminine inclinations.
Still is.
The reason most of us are taught to write with our right hand is that writing with the left hand was deemed a terrible sin. for centuries. Another terrible crime under Roman rule was being intellectually or spiritually gifted and female at the same time. The word witch stems from the Germanic English Wittga, which means to know. If you know a lot of things and are female in the 15th century, just keep it to yourself. The patriarchy might send the Spanish Inquisition after you to burn you at the stake. And first and foremost, the Satanists at that time were those who followed the Torah and not the word of Christ. Satan archetypally stems from Saturn, and the day of Saturn, Saturday, was the Sabbath day of the Hebrew tradition. And one of the interesting things about this is that at that time it was deemed a terrible sin to have anything to do with mammon, to do with money, in the Christian tradition and the Islamic tradition. So they said, well, the Jews don't think, that's a terrible sin, so, we're not going to abolish money, but we don't want to touch it, so let's shove off all the burden on them. And so it's a terrible thing. They demonize them for something that they forced on them. You cannot serve God and mammon, but you can also not serve God when you're demonizing the people that you're asking to take care of your dirty work. In the Egyptian tradition, Saturn was Set, the bumbling trickster god who murders his brother, who is the avatar of the heart chakra Osiris. Set himself representing the sex chakra and the gut feeling on a cosmic level, which in the Kabbalah tree of life is Yesod, and the path of Tav, from which Yesod creates Malkut, the kingdom, which in Hebrew and Christian mysticism is the seventh day of creation, the day of rest, the Sabbath day, Saturn day, Satan day. This is where the teaching of Satan being the angel who God orders to create the world originates. This teaching was passed down through the Gnostic traditions, from whence sprang the first forms of what was later to be called Christianity, in its development within the subterranean crypt-like mystery school temples of Mithras and Dionysus, that taught of the mystery of death and resurrection, schools that linked the mystery schools of the Egyptian priesthood, whose ceremonies were held in the subterranean tomb temples of the pharaohs in the Valley of the Kings, by priesthood diplomacy through the mystery schools of Alexandria, the Essene Brotherhood of Qumran, and the mystery schools of Eleusis in Greece. It was this great spiritual and mystical renaissance that was kindled by the great cultural exchanges initiated by the Greco-Roman will to explore and conquer. These same mystery teachings were passed down through the schools of the medieval Gnostics, the Cathars, and others, most of whom were murdered for committing the heresy of preserving the original teachings of Christianity, the original teachings having been composed of a beautiful and complex latticework of archetypal symbology pertaining to subtle currents of cosmic consciousness inherent in all life. The Roman Church felt these teachings too heady for the common folk, envisioning a united global Roman Empire under a universally understandable and watered-down syncretic version of the mystery school teachings of the Levant and the developing Occident. Catholic means universal. They were basically the first Unitarians. In hoc signo vinces, in the sign you will conquer. The visionary message of Constantine is a notericon of the first four letters of the mystical name of Yeshua the Christ from the mystery school tradition. IHSV. Yod He Shin Vav. A name concealing many mystical understandings ultimately related to the oneness of God and humanity. Yod He Vav He. Yahweh. Jehovah. The Tetragrammaton, the fourfold name of God, with a shin in the middle, representing this great revelation that we are all to tame our animal natures, to unite our will with the will of God within us. The Roman version of Yahweh was Jupiter, And the Greek version was Zeus. So the Greek translation of Yeshua was Jesus, or Jesus, to get the same underlying symbolic theme across. Symbols are the language of the mystery schools. These transcendental mysteries are beyond what anyone can express in words. Though words as we use them today are mostly constructed of these mystery school symbols, the Greek and Latin characters from whence the majority of our Western languages are derived are based on the Semitic characters, a system of 22 hieroglyphs, which relate to 22 cosmic traditions. Cosmic principles, sorry, I was spacing out because I realized that this wasn't, okay. I like something happening back here while I'm doing this, but that's going to keep happening if I don't. 22 hieroglyphs which relate to 22 cosmic principles that are found expressed in a variety of ways in the mythological pantheons of most ancient traditions. And pardon me if you know everything I'm saying already, but I've got another audience here, and you know, I've got to talk about all of this as best I can, which isn't the best, but it's the best I can do. And I've still found in the 22 paths of the Kabbalic tree of life, the 22 cards of the major arcana of the tarot, the Hindu deity system, and many other mystical systems. The Arabic alphabet marks the point in anthropological apocalypsis when the Egyptians and the Israelites culturally kissed. And so this is the hieratic, the cursive Egyptian, and then here's the Aramaic, Hebrew, and then here's a table showing how all of these characters relate to one another on a mystical, symbolical level. This is one of the reasons that translating the Quran into anything other than the original Arabic is frowned upon in the Islamic tradition. The Quran is littered with subtle mystical symbolism. And I found through my research that almost every English translation of the Quran has at least a decent handful of mistranslations, either purposefully or not, that are meant to confuse and disturb, and they're things that the Arabic-speaking communities don't pick up on because they're not well-versed in English and we're not well-versed in Arabic. So, one of the most important tools of a magus is his grimoire, the great textbook in which a seer's observations are noted down and patterns and trends between things are noted, a book of spells. Grimoire stems from the word grammar, same root anyways, and rightfully so. Aleister Crowley said that the greatest grimoire is an etymological dictionary. Language determines our perspectives on reality and our interactions with reality. Is your glass half empty or half full? The way you personally define things changes many variables within your inner and consequently outer worlds. The Greek etymos means truth, and etymologically is truthology. Every word is a poem, and when you dig to the roots of a word and fully grasp its origin and initial poetic intent, you begin to read, write, and speak in a manner that absolutely changes your interaction with the world. For example, the word money and the entire system of exchange based on the concepts generated by the idea of this word. The etymological origin of the word money is the name of the Greek goddess Manita, in whose temples the first coins were pressed and were not valid currency unless blessed by the priests of Manita in her temple by the act of impressing the image that only they could impress in the metal. This is a literal cult. The first coins were seen as magical talismans that the priests would give you if you gave them all of your stuff. And the cult of money caught on big. The shekel and all other forms of money followed suit thereafter. There were similar forms of exchange prior to that, shells and things like that. But the Greco-Roman cult of Manita began what money is today. Prior to that cult, all societies, even the most vicious and tyrannical, made sure that everyone had food, shelter, medical care if available, and certainly then as now, if you did more for society, you got more perks. The priest caste back then lived in much better digs than any commoner, but everyone had his or her basic needs taken care of, because that's the one basic human instinct defended in every major religious and spiritual tradition. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This is what Rabbi Hillel taught was the only teaching of the Torah. The rest, he said, is commentary. Go and learn, he said. This is a central teaching in Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, Islam, Sikhism, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, Taoism, paganism, of all forms of paganism on the earth. It's truly the golden rule. When you understand the origin of our human concepts through etymology, through truthology, you can come to awarenesses that allow you virtually to overcome any obstacle and conquer the universe, as it were, as much as us silly little human beings are allowed to. Vi viri universum vivus vici. I, while living, by the power of truth, have conquered the universe. The motto of a master of the temple. Awareness, shining light on things, is the key of the seer. For centuries, the metaphors used were always about the light versus the dark. Enlightenment or illumination versus the forces of darkness. Ultimately, the force of darkness is ignorance. When you step into a room in the middle of the night filled with people and potentially dangerous objects with the lights off, you are liable to stumble, trip on things, and hurt yourself and others out of the ignorance of what is going on in that room. Turn on the light, enlighten or illuminate the room around you, and you see everything around you before diving in and making an ass of yourself in the dark. The room filled with people and potentially dangerous objects is this world. Illumination is understanding the world enough to never make a mistake. This is seership. Magic historically is first and foremost the art of seership, of observing the archetypal patterns of the mysteries of whatever it is that governs this world that we live in. Magic is the art of the illuminated seer who knows somewhat what is going on. The magus, the plural of magus, is magi. The three magi who visited the Christ were seers, astrologers, probably from Tibet, though the mystical tradition has them attributed as an Asian, an African, and a Druid to represent the three schools of the mystic. But this has been misconstrued as an actual allusion to races. It was an allusion to the colors which represent these schools, which in the Renaissance era, when all the paintings of the three magi as an Asian, and as a Druid, and as a black guy, you know, that was their subtle way of saying that. But it has nothing to do with race. Astrology is the seer's science of observing complicated patterns in psychological, spiritual, and other inner characteristics in relation to extremely complicated patterns of time. The clockwork position of the planets in their oddball relation to the fixed stars being the metaphorical calendrical gears from which these complexly nuanced patterns in time can be mapped out And after carefully monitoring the life experiences and psychological traits of countless millions of individuals with similar zodiacal clockwork trends, over periods of thousands upon thousands of years of observation, myriad patterns and trends were reasoned out between them all, just as an individual can be born on an isolated island with no knowledge of calendars, but by telling each of the days as they relate to the seasons, they can eventually reason out when it'll snow next and when spring will arrive. The art of the seer or magus, magic, became associated more though with bhakti yoga and karma yoga. Karma yoga being action itself, the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. Dedication to any task at hand, whatever they may be, and the cause and effect of any act in the physical world whatsoever. But more popularly, magic is associated with bhakti yoga, the yoga of dedication, using candles, incense, artwork, handcrafts to emphasize a prayer, rather than just clasping your hands together and speaking your prayer, building an entire ceremony of art around it, with physical implementations to say, I really mean this prayer, God. Trust me. I assure you, God. But the methods from which these traditions derive is the time-tested scientific method of trying things out until you see what works and what doesn't. And this is the art of the seer, the art of observation. But this is just one aspect of the seer. This is the tendency of the masculine seer, the left brain, the one who observes and documents logical patterns. The feminine tendency of the seer, or right-brained seer, is the art of seeing beyond the veil. Mohammed was an epileptic who was granted visionary experiences of worlds beyond our world that modern psychology now labels as psychosis. Modern psychologists tend to forget quite often that modern psychology is less than an average human lifespan old. In the time of Freud and Jung, psychosis was usually still mostly called neurosis, and neurosis was often defined as originating in either too much focus on the past or too much focus on the future. It was a rather simple framework that we were working on nearly 20th century, less than a human lifespan ago, to map out the mind. And what happened? We had a revolution in our understanding of how we can govern the transmissions of our receptor sites. We began to take physical charge of our own neurology by means of chemical experimentation. Jung was a psychiatrist, and in his time, psychiatry was mostly conversational analysis. When psychiatry became pharmacological, a lot of things changed. When I say modern psychologists tend to forget quite often that modern psychology is less than an average human lifespan old, the reaction is with some people, but look at our enormous institutions, look at our millions of pages of textbooks, look at our innumerable experiments and consistent results. My response to that attitude is, look at that one little one-room cottage on our lakefront. That is a reproduction of Solomon Juneau's house, the first settler on this plot of Wisconsin. Less than 2 human lifespans ago, that little room house, log cabin, which is like a quarter of the size of this room, that was the only thing here for hundreds and hundreds of miles. Less than 2 guys ago, 2 human lifespans ago, all of these skyscrapers, all of these financial and political institutions, all of these thousands of buildings that feel like they've been here forever because they were built before we were born. A lot of them, not all of them. None of them were here less than 2 guys ago. That little cottage was all that could be found for hundreds and hundreds of miles, besides forestation and native territory. Globalization and industrialization have rapidified our progress to the point where most of us can't keep up with each other anymore, and the majority of the big decisions that are made regarding our financial and industrial world, and consequently our academic world, and everything else, are determined by whoever ends up with more abstract tokens. We are living in a global slot machine that is affecting our global reality in a worse manner than any artificial intelligence uprising in any dystopian sci-fi ever dreamed. I'm not going to get to Mary Magdalene, but this is our Scarlet Woman. That's a painting I made. This is the yantra of Matsya, the fish avatar of Vishnu. At the end of the Kalpa, at the end of the Aeon, while Brahma was resting, the demon Hayagriva stole the Vedas. Vishnu discovered the theft and descended to earth in the form of a little fish, the Matsya avatar. One day the king of Dravidya Desha, Satyavrata, cupped water in his hands as an offering to his ancestors. In the water of his cupped hands, he found a little fish. The fish asked him to save him from predators and let him grow. Satyavrata was filled with compassion for the little fish, so he put the fish in a pot. But eventually the fish grew too big for the pot, so he moved the fish from there to a well. Soon the fish outgrew the well. Then he moved it to a tank. And when it outgrew the tank, he transferred the fish finally to the sea. The fish rapidly outgrew even the great sea. Satyavrata realized that this was no ordinary fish and asked the fish, "Who are you?" The fish identified itself as Vishnu and informed the king of an impending deluge. The king was asked to save a male and female of every species of animal, plant, and seed in a boat. And along with all this, the Vedas as well, the scriptures of the sacred science of humanity and that which lies beyond us and that which lies beyond that, which is within us. All. The fish asked the king to tie the boat to its fins with the help of Shesha, the great serpent. The deluge came, the fish avatar saved existence, and a new cycle of life began. This, by the way, is the seal of the Mahatmas, in this time anyways. And there's another version of it here. Although the fish in the center has been changed here to represent the yoni. And as it says in the Book of Lies, there are 7 blades or 7 swords guarding her. And if you look, 77 plus 7 plus 7 divided by 7, which is 2. 77 plus 2 plus 77 is, anyone good at math? 156, which is the prophesied number of Siam, the land to come within and without, as it says in the Gospel of Thomas, when the male and the female are made one and the same, so that the male is no longer male and the female is no longer female. The above is as the below. An eye replaces an eye, a hand replaces a hand, a foot replaces a foot, and an image replaces an image. Then we will enter the kingdom of God. By the way, Bab means gate. Al is the name of God. An is our son. The gate of God, and also another way to look at it is the gate of, that there are multiple, but that's a hint. Ultimately, the gate is the earth. The earth came out of the sun. Everything, we'll get to that. I actually talk about that in here. So, Mother Earth, our Scarlet Woman. Okay, the seers of the ages always knew that this time would be a time of great transition. So in the late 1700s, they began paving the way politically in preparation. This is a quote from the authentic rituals and doctrines of the illuminated seers of Bavaria, mysteries class, philosophi sages, as translated into English from German for the first time by a Frater of the Ordo Templi Orientis. And it's published, and I don't have a copy here, but you can find it online as the secret. Why don't I remember? That's terrible. Okay. Anyways, everything that separates men, makes them mistrustful and superstitious, cowardly and inactive, that promotes the inequality of wealth, is a pernicious political tool, however much it may flatter our power and our wishes. Not being of a lasting nature, all of this will bring about its own punishment, because it runs counter to the course of nature. That book, by the way, is called The Secret School of Wisdom. You can find it. It's published by Louis Masonic. And, in the late 1700s, when a Masonic sacred book of law was still universally called the Book of the Law, a group of anarcho-mystics decided to form a lodge in Bavaria around a red Book of the Law, symbolic of the last stage of the alchemical process. These mystics worked directly with the friars of St. Francis of Wycombe, whose motto, "Do what thou wilt," was inspired by Gnostic St. Rabelais' work Gargantua and Pantagruel. Pantagruel, or cannabis, was a popular choice of pipeweed among this circle. Most notably Gnostic Saint Adam Weishaupt, whose name is sort of a joke. Wies is a beer, a German beer, but simultaneously Weishaupt means the white-haired, the like sort of Gandalf the Greybeard, sort of like distinguished. So it's got a double meaning. It's sort of a joke name. Speaking of joke names, well, here's a cool little article about that. In 1776, various master masons, including Cagliostro, representing the Grand Orient Lodges, pledged to a sacred vendetta against the French crown. Adam Weishaupt, Grand Master of the Order of Illuminati, a secret occult revolutionary group within German Freemasonry. Franz Anton Mesmer, who tried to obtain scientific recognition for the Obia or Kundalini force by calling it animal magnetism and demonstrating its workings before the French Medical Society, and the heirs of Martinez, Pascali, and St. Martin, the Illuminati within Parisian Freemasonry, aided and abetted by the friars of St. Francis, vulgarly known as the Hellfire Club, the Thelemic Lodge within the English Parliament, representing revolutionary and pro-American conspirators. Their abbey, like Curley's in 1919, had "Do it thou wilt" over the doorway. We're agreed that the lost Mason word was mankind, i.e. that the illumination of all of humanity was the next step in evolution, that the principle of hierarchy or submission was in an occult sense dead and useless, that the principle of liberty, will, was in the occult power of the new eon, and that the governments of the world had to be torn down vertebrae by vertebrae. And later in this article it mentions that that procedure was to be accomplished by turning people on. Not by force, not by violence or guns or political things, but by education and empowerment and encouraging people to seek out the God within and without and within every being surrounding oneself. Oh, this is lovely. I don't think I worked this in here, but this is from Shakespeare's King Richard II in 1597. This is from The Secret Teachings of All Ages. What's the original title? It's Masonic, Kabbalistic, Hermetic, and Rosicrucian Symbolical Philosophy. The headpiece showing light and shaded A's. The ornamental headpiece shown above has long been considered a Baconian or Rosicrucian signature. The light and dark A's appear in several volumes published by emissaries of the Rosicrucians. Okay. I don't think I worked that in that much, but Crowley is the living pseudonym of the order in the early 20th century. He's practically a fictional character. He was in real life a brilliant poet and philosopher. Much of the material released in his name was filtered through him, but comes from a greater body of adepts. But the point of his myth is that he was no one special. As I said to you the other day, and I put this in there because of that, out-prophet him. The prophet is within. That's an old tradition. You can read about it in the papers of the Illuminated Seers of Bavaria in that book that I mentioned, and trace it back to Sir Francis Bacon and Christian Rosenkreuz and many others. There's always been a single weird, eccentric individual chosen as the dramatis persona of the order. And one of the major points in choosing Crowley this time around was that the great revelation of our time is to be a revelation of the divinity at the seat of the soul of every single individual. As Tyler of the Temple, Crowley's mythic visage wards off any who aren't ready for that revelation. Are you really ready to wholeheartedly love everyone on this planet with all of your heart, even if they seem despicable or evil to you or people you know? Are you ready to, as Jesus said, love your enemies and do good to those who persecute you? As it says in Luke 6:27, are you ready to find the master and the madman, the pauper, the murderess, and the damned? Here's a quote. Redemption is a bad word. It implies a debt. For every star possesses boundless wealth. The only proper way to deal with the ignorant is to bring them to the knowledge of their starry heritage. To do this, it is necessary to behave as must be done in order to get on good terms with animals and children, to treat them with absolute respect, even in a certain sense with worship. There's a quote from Gnostic Saint Aleister Crowley. And here's another quote from him. Christ, at the height of his career, found time to wash the feet of his disciples. Any master who does not do this on every plane is a black brother. And then this is a quote from the heart of the Master. Love burns in the heart of the Master. He, seeing only God in everything with the white flame of worship, purges it of all its fancied imperfection. His boundless adoration kindles space itself, leaving no void that is not compassed by his passion. In the Equinox, Volume 1, Number 10, the issue released during the time the notonnier of the order at that time was leaving his post, it says, "Our readers will be relieved to know that there is no such person as Aleister Crowley. He is probably a solar myth." This sounds like a joke, but it's true. Mystically, the number 666 represents the relation between solar consciousness and the heart chakra in the early Gnostic tradition of the Book of Revelation. And in carbon, interestingly enough, there are 6 protons, 6 electrons, and 6 neutrons. Here he is depicted as the Master Therion, An being the ancient name of the solar deity. Therion, the human beast that we are, child of the sun. He represents the golden mean spiral here, the sacred geometry of solar birthed existence. Our whole planet came out of the sun. Everything you can possibly see on this planet, in this world, is condensed, molten sun, solidifying in various ways and manipulated into new forms by us beings, taking sentience within it as physical beasts. And composed of sun, And if that doesn't blow your freaking mind, how much time do I have left? 10 minutes. Okay.
Until you exhaust yourself.
Oh my God. Okay. Let's see here.
Are you going to have some time for questions or discussion?
Hopefully.
Okay.
Okay. So, is anybody really good at handwriting and has seen this handwriting before?
Well, this looks cursive. You can't really see it very clearly.
Yeah, it's a little. I wish I could zoom in. Oh, there I can. Okay, there we go. Anyone good at that? Okay, well, I'll give you a hint, and I wrote the hint down. He was called devil by his mother as a child. He was demonized by the press, devoutly followed by many, inspired many great cultural movements. He was a skeptic who didn't take religion at face value, constantly searching for someone who'd actually seen God, and believed that every man and every woman is a star. I call him the Master Theorion of India, Swami Vivekananda. But any expert graphologist or any other handwriting analyst would tell you his and Curly's handwriting were written by the same individual at different periods of time in their lives. If they looked at this example of Vivekananda's writing and the Book of the Law anyways. I mean, you can tell by the subtle angular and arithmetic tendencies, alignment, form level, and general signature proportional characteristics. I mean, if you take the put it side by side with this, the Book of the Law and the original, it's interesting, and there's a lot more interesting stuff than that.
So whose handwriting?
This is Swami Vivekananda's handwriting.
And who is that?
Okay, well,
like I just really disappointed you.
if you get the newest issue, one of the newest issues of the U.S. Indian newspaper, which comes out of Chicago, he's on the cover. Because they're about to have the biggest congressional meeting of Hindus in history in Chicago next month. And they put him there because it's commemorating what he did for Hinduism. And the Dalai Lama is going to be speaking there. And all the greatest speakers of the Hindu tradition are going to be there, along with people representing political movements and all sorts of things. It's wonderful. Here's a quote from him. 2 quotes. Vivekananda, not Grote. The soul is a circle whose circumference is nowhere, limitless, but whose center is in some body. Death is but a change of center. God is a circle whose circumference is nowhere and whose center is everywhere. When we can get out of the limited center of body, we shall realize God, our true self. Each soul is a circle. The center is where the body is, and the activity is manifested there. You are omnipresent, though you have the consciousness of being concentrated in only one point. That point has taken up particles of matter and formed them into a machine to express itself. That through which it expresses itself is called the body. You are everywhere. When one body or machine fails you, the center moves on and takes up other particles of matter, finer or grosser, and works through them. Here is man. And what is God? God is a circle with circumference nowhere and center everywhere. Every point in that circle is living, conscious, active, and equally working. With our limited souls, only one point is conscious, and that point moves forward and backward. Here's the second quote. Do not talk of the wickedness of the world and all its sins. Weep that you are bound to see wickedness yet. Weep that you are bound to see sin everywhere. And if you want to help the world, do not condemn it. Do not weaken it more. For what is sin? I'm going to put this picture of him here so that you can take a look. Um, For what is sin and what is misery and what are all these but the results of weakness? The world is made weaker and weaker every day by such teachings. Men are taught from childhood that they are weak and sinners. Teach them that they are all glorious children of immortality, even those who are the weakest in manifestation. Let positive, strong, helpful thought enter into their brains from very childhood. Lay yourselves open to these thoughts, and not to weakening and paralyzing ones. Say to your own minds, I am He, I am He. Let it ring day and night in your minds like a song. Here's another picture of Him. And at the point of death, declare, I am He. That is the truth. The infinite strength of the world is yours. Drive out the superstition that has covered your minds. Let us be brave. Know the truth and practice the truth. The goal may be distant, but awake, arise, and stop not till the goal is reached. How much time do I have left?
5 minutes to 8.
Well, I had other things I wanted to share with you, but I think I'll just end it with any questions.
Can you keep going?
Yes.
We gave some wonderful examples of sacred geometry with the circle and the circumference and one that.
Can I share a poem with you that I wrote?
Sure.
I think he just read my mind.
Okay. So I don't know if you're familiar with Howl by Allen Ginsberg, but it starts off with, I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness. So I start this off with, you say you saw the best minds of your generation destroyed by madness. Well, I live in a society that probably needs nursing homes for children with past life memory-induced neuroses. Children staring into the heart of the sun at midday for hours without blinking or losing sight. And then watching the clouds in the sky interact with subtle energetic currents of consciousness within and without, psychically bombarded by mimetic streams of global psychosis through liquid crystal mind mirrors, having visionary dreams of the living blood of Iraqi and Afghani civilians, women and children pouring out of the gas pumps, who poured their hearts into art in the hopes of inspiring global compassion, and were then poisoned by psychotropic neurotoxins designed to dismantle cognitive functions as a punishment for loving too many people at once, who interdimensionaled out and smiling and waving to every human being in sight were only to be thrown into mental hospitals to be given a Whitman sampler of pharmaceuticals, each nigh identical in chemical composition to the plants they were derived from. Natural plants that produce the same effects. Plants that aren't as profitable as the artificial, patentable substitutes. Plants without laundry lists of harmful side effects, sometimes including death. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by algorithms that translate marketing data into an archetypal nightmare, bombarding our species' collective unconscious with the desire to overconsume overproduced hunks of the flesh of our Mother Earth, gutted from her bones, the metals and stones, the plastics made of her blood, drained as no Anne Rice vampire could ever imagine, and pumped into her atmosphere by psychologically hyperventilated minds speeding around in a wheeled metal womb that separates them from the world Goddess gave us and comforts them with familiar music, air conditioning, and fast food. Perinatal Matrix 1, a sick substitute for the primal union with Mother, the false oceanic bliss of not having to deal with too many other human beings face to face, an international industrial infantile regression gone insane. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by digits on screens, by pieces of paper made from cotton, symbol of southern slavery, with printed on portraits of founding fathers who fought entire lives to abolish taxation and manipulation of populations through nearly identical currency systems. I saw them destroyed by giving up lifetime endeavors and dreams to enslave themselves just to stay alive, forgetting that even the most tyrannical societies in human history at least fed, clothed, and sheltered all members of their societies before the cult of capital caught on. The good intentions of the cult of Manita led to bad ideas. And one thing led to the next, and here we are in a society where arbitrary numbers are ascribed to literally everything. Numbers that we are told we are forced at gunpoint to sell our lives, hearts, and energy and time to obtain. As the Crime Think Ex-Workers Collective, I like that Ex-Workers Collective, said, and to change everything. When all value is concentrated into a single instrument, even the irrecoverable moments of our lives are drained of meaning, becoming tokens in an abstract calculus of power. Everything that cannot be financially quantified falls by the wayside. Life becomes a scramble for financial gain, each against all, sell or be sold. To make a profit, that means to gain more control over the resources of society relative to everyone else. We can't all profit at once. For one person to profit, others have to lose leverage, proportionately speaking. When investors profit on employees' labor, that means the more the employees work, the wider the financial gap between them becomes. A system driven by profit produces poverty at the same pace as it concentrates wealth. The pressure to compete generates innovations faster than any other previous system, but alongside them it produces ever-increasing disparities. Where equestrians once ruled over pedestrians, stealth bombers now sail over motorists and homeless people, and because everyone has to pursue profit rather than accomplishing things for their own sake, the results of all this labor can be disastrous. Climate change is just the latest in a series of catastrophes that even the most powerful capitalists have been powerless to halt. Indeed, capitalism doesn't reward entrepreneurs for remedying crises, but for cashing in on them. This country was founded as a place for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Does anyone in this country have any of that? And if they do, completely, if they can wholeheartedly say that to me, look me in the eye, and mean it from the depth of their soul,
How's my recording? How much was that sacred geometry class?
How much you like?
How much was it? $15. Okay.
Yes. I am Katie Cloyce, and I am 87. And I have known Phoenix probably a rather short time compared to all of you, maybe 8 months or so. And I do have to say that all of the passion that he's shown in this presentation is real. And he is truly a Renaissance man in that he embraces all that is good and should be good in the world. And the sincerity of his presentation just shows that this is him. This is where he comes regarding that. We are aware of that too. Phoenix has spoken here quite a few times over the years. So we appreciate him also, and the insights that he can give us, and the depth of his knowledge.
It's amazing.
It's quite amazing. So I hope that it doesn't sometimes weigh too heavily on you, though.
It does, but I'm still alive
That's,
after.
I mean, that would be my only concern, that
I'm fine. I'll be fine.
it weighs very heavily on you. It's important to, and you mentioned this in your talk tonight, that we need to be, our outlook is so important. We have to treat and look at everybody, regardless of what is happening in the world right now, which is not good by any means. We still have to operate and recognize that all life is one, and divinity exists everywhere. In every person, every animal, every plant, every mineral, whatever. All of that is part of the divinity. And if we can keep our minds focused on that, despite all the horrible things that are happening around us, then there might be some good that will come out of this. We have to do that. I think it's so important, and I'm glad you mentioned that in your talk tonight. You were reading so on. It's so important. And it's very theosophical also. Well, thank you so much, Phoenix. Truly appreciate what you have to offer. So let us conclude, unless anybody has anything else they'd like to say. And this would be really a fine ending.